Hey, I'm Brian Van, SportBikeTrackGear.com, and today we're going to give you a close-up look at Max Van's MotoAmerica Ninja 400. Okay, we just got done with his first ever MotoAmerica race. To be fair, this was Max Van's 7th ever race weekend, and it was his pro debut. We had a great weekend, and we'll talk about that in a following video, but I wanted to open up this series and show you the bike and talk a little bit about the stuff that I had to do in order to get Max and the motorcycle ready to go compete in MotoAmerica Junior Cup. Okay, getting ready for this was a whole lot different than prepping to go to a WERA race weekend. It's a pro event, and they have requirements that you're not going to find at the regional level. One of the first things that we had to do was they require certain badging on the suit, right? Dunlop patches up here, MotoAmerica patch here. You have to have this AMA FIM badge here, and on the back of the suit, the big Dunlop patch across the back. We added a few others, of course. Got Max's name there. One of our partners, Helmet House, that is helping support his effort. Got those guys here on the back. Added a few more on the front. Shoei, got his name again, of course. STG, M4 exhaust, VP Racing, that's the fuel that we're using. Pop Shadow T. She's the one who printed all this stuff off for. They do great work over there at Pop Shadow Decals. Of course, Vortex, right? Added a couple of STGs down here and came up with what I think is a really good looking race suit. This is the, if you're curious, this is the Alpine Stars GP Tech V3 suit. And of course, we're running the airbag. I mean, that's just, I think when it comes to protection, that is the magic. You're going to have yourself or your kid out there, right? If you can afford it, you should 100% have that in the suit. Focusing on the motorcycle now, there were a couple of things that we had to do to this bike, several things actually, to get it ready to pass technical inspection, okay? There was a restrictor plate. We'll try to give you a look at this. I'm gonna take the bodywork off throughout this video. There was a restrictor plate that goes between the throttle body boots and the cylinder head, okay? Had to install that. There was a rev limiting quick shifter that actually limits the revs on this bike to 10,350. We had to acquire one of those, which was a real challenge, right? I had to call favor in from my buddy Mike Davis, right? His son Blake Davis is racing Junior Cup 2, good friend of Max's, and he was able to help me find a used one that was installed on a bike because all the new stuff was totally out of stock, right? We almost weren't able to make the round because of that quick shifter. Another thing you have to do to meet the MotoAmerica standard for this bike is you have to add a rain light. So what I did is I got all this stuff just from one of our distributors, Western Power Sports. It's an on-off switch here on the left bar. And you can see this is just a little off-road LED light. I wired this in. I'll give you a closer look at that in a hot second, right? But that's another thing you have to do in order to pass tech inspection for MotoAmerica. Interesting points with the bike. Tires, we had literally one compound choice. It was the medium plus rear and the soft front. Everybody was on the exact same tires. They install them right there at the event. Dunlop has just a huge rig setup. Service was great, and the tires performed really, really well. Max was able to ride the bike to personal bests that were so far beyond anything he'd ever done before. These tires are absolutely amazing on the Junior Cup bikes. Okay, before we take the bodywork off, right, this was a brand new painted set just before this event, right? Look at this lower. This is no crashing. This is only riding. Max had a really good, clean first weekend, okay? That Dunlop decal, yeah, that was brand new. This number plate, also brand new. The toe piece for the rear brake lever, okay, that was also new because I did have a little crash damage I had to fix from the last WERA round, right? It got tangled up with another rider. So This thing now looks like it's ready for a knife fight showdown. Okay, he ground it down so much, and we're getting kind of close to going through the lower here. Previous to this round, he'd never really drugged the bodywork. We use the AIM Solo DL lap timer. It's mounted on the triple clamp. I'll show you that in a little bit. You're able to go in there and it gives you a predictive lean angle. And I think the highest one I heard from Jimmy was 63 degrees lean angle, right? What that really tells me is these Dunlops, right, that they have developed for these junior cup bikes, these things are absolutely bitching. Those kids are out there flying on these tires. Okay, before I dive into the bike, you're also gonna need a radio just like this one that we got here. Here's the exact model that we got, right? I ordered this thing off of Amazon, right? It was like under $100, and it did everything it needed to. You need this, for example, when you're moving in on Thursday. They actually physically call you and tell you when to come up and come into the paddock, right, before they direct you to your cold pit position. Also, during practice and race days, they're continually broadcasting over this, right? If your rider's out there and has a fall, you're going to hear that on the radio oftentimes before you even see it or know about it. If you need to come down to tech inspection, there's an issue, whatever, they're going to call you out on this. So you have to have this. This is a requirement to compete in MotoAmerica. The bike itself. We talked about some of the technical requirements. Now let's talk about performance parts that we're running on our bike. I like the Woodcraft clip-ons. Eric developed these specifically for the Ninja 400. Okay, they put it in a really good ergonomic position. Works great for Max. Still onto the hand controls. We have the Motion Pro quick turn throttle with the fastest cam. Stock brake master. Driven brake lever guard. We're using the CRG folding levers. These have really worked well for us. Max has had a couple of tip overs. That happens. And these have held up great along the way. I did replace the blade on this one just because it was worn down and I didn't like the way it looked. Stock clutch perch. We're using the AIM Solo DL lap timer. There's a lot of cool data that's available with that, and we're using that to help break down splits and different things while we're at the track. Driven gas cap. Anti-gravity lightweight battery. Power Commander V. This model comes with ignition control, and that's what we had originally installed on this bike. I was able to keep this Power Commander, but I had to physically cut off the harness that ran to the ignition coils because per the MotoAmerica rules for 2020, you are not able to do anything with ignition control. So we were able to continue to use that unit and use the fuel tables that we built into it, but all the ignition stuff had to be completely disabled. Another worthwhile mention here is going to be, we have Armor Body's race body work on the bike now. We've run hot bodies, that works good too. This is Armor Body's seat pan, Superbike seat pan. And what they did is this is much higher than the stock seat. We found that with Max on the bike, he's a little bigger in stature, and this just really worked better for him. It got him into a more athletic position. In order to facilitate the installation of this, I had to make a little change here, and I think we have a video on that actually, where I reroute the cable that is the release for the seat because this is using the same mounting hardware. There's a couple of different versions of a Superbike seat like this floating around. Okay, this is just the one that we're using, and it's worked out pretty good for us so far. MotoAmerica has a spec fuel for 2020. It is the BP MGP fuel. Once we had the motor done, right, we use a local guy, Jamie Hanshaw Racing Engines. There's really not a lot you can do to this bike, to be fair, okay? Jamie reviewed the rules package. I believe it's pretty much cam timing, and then he just went in there and cleaned the motor up, okay? Once he does that, we installed that rev limiting quick shifter. You have to have the bike mapped for the fuel that you're going to be using. I took this out to my good friend Richard Harris, Apex Manufacturing, owner of Sportbike Track Time. He mapped this for us and was able to optimize the package that we had along with the fuel that we're using. This also has an MWR air filter installed. Other things that we've done. We are using the M4 full exhaust system. This one's proven to make good power. You want to make sure that if you have an older design, the new one has the insert tack welded in the can, right? You want to leave the insert in, they make more power with the insert installed. We're using Vortex adjustable rear sets for Max, and for the amount of lean angle that he's using, we have to bring the foot pegs all the way into the upward position. We are getting a little drag here on the brake lever and even just a little bit on the shift lever, but realistically for the amount of lean angle that he's using, that is completely normal. Clutch. We are running an entirely stock clutch right now. Stock clutch springs, stock frictions, steels, the whole nine. We did add on this little Hot Bodies external clutch spring kit. This clutch has basically no feel from the factory because it's a 3-spring design. They're really super lightweight. Okay, so you get on the lever when it's stock, there's no feel there at all, and it almost doesn't put enough pressure on the clutch plates. This external spring really helps to make sure that it's, fully engaged. Okay, I need to tear this down after the race weekend, but we made it through the entire race weekend and we had 0 clutch slippage. Max ran the second race. He ran times way faster than he had all weekend, and everything was good to go. I'm really excited to get it apart and have a look at that, measuring the entire stack to see where we're at in terms of where we started. Coolant. You can only use water at MotoAmerica. We have distilled water in here right now. I eliminated the OEM overflow bottle, and we've installed this Motion Pro aftermarket, just a little cleaner design, a little smaller. Case cover protection. We're using the GB Racing stuff. I'll show you on the other side. The kids crashed it a couple of times. It's really held up well. Brakes. Spiegler brake lines. We've got the Galfer Ninja 400 rotor. This isn't the high-end Superbike version. This is just the Ninja 400 wave rotor. It's worked great for Max. He's a hard breaker. You look at his data, it shows that he's a late and a hard breaker. We've had 0 issues with warping. We're running Vesra ZZ pads on this. They hold up well, plenty of braking power, and he's really able to modulate those well. Suspension. We are running K-Tech front and rear, fork cartridge kit, rear shock. We've got a 950 spring in the shock right now. We've got 7.5 fork springs in there. K-Tech steering damper. The bike's proven to be so stable. I think we're going to experiment at the next round at Indy and remove the damper from the bike entirely and see if that little bit of extra feel that he's going to get from the front end, because it's just so stable, I don't know that the damper is necessary. It's making the bike a little bit heavier, right? And it can remove a little bit of that front end feel, so we might experiment a couple of sessions without the steering damper. Other side of the bike, here's that Stator cover, and that's got a couple of decent crashes on it. That's held up fantastic. For the quick shifter, okay, when you install this, it has to be done in such a way that the folks at MotoAmerica and the tech inspection are able to plug into the micro USB port right there on the side of the module without removing any bodywork from the bike. So what I did is I took the sprocket cover and I basically cut it apart and I turned it into a bracket to mount this little module to, and I've done it in such a way that they can access that micro USB port. Drilled some holes in there, a couple of cable ties through it. It's really rigid, all good to go. You'll note too with the rear sets, the pivot bolt, safety wired. The adjuster bolt for the toe piece on the shift side as well as on the brake side, I've safety wired those. Safety wired the bolt for the knuckle, right? You want to make sure all that stuff stays good and tight. Any one of those things comes loose, that can be the end of the race, and you don't want to have a mechanical like that. Gearing, here's another really big change for us. This is all 415. We had 520 non-O-ring on it. Now we have a 415 non-O-ring DID chain. We're using Vortex 415 gearing front and back. The idea here is lighter weight, okay, and less friction. This chain needs to be cleaned, inspected, and lubricated. This has the full weekend on this chain. We made one very small gearing change. But you can see there is really not a lot of drag there, and that chain is to the dirty side, and it's really cold right now. Big difference. Helps the bike make a little more power. Caleb, if you just want to kind of pan around, you get an idea of just how I secured some of the wire harnesses. You just want to make sure that you're not going to do anything that's going to create a DNF for a simple mistake. Safety wire, got an OEM oil filter on at this point after it came back from the engine builder. Put a clamp around it, drilled through the clamp. That's safety wired. Drain plug is safety wired as well. For the exhaust flange bolts, what I do is once they're tightened up, I'll go ahead and put a little high temp silicone on the threads on the end of the stud. That's always proven to be just enough to hold those on. If they happen to come loose, they won't work their way off. Rear brake pads are OEM. Max is using the rear brake a little bit at this point, but not a tremendous amount. We were on a Superbike brake reservoir here in the back for him. This bike had very little rear brake travel, just the way we had it set up before. So what I did is I put just a little bit of air in there for it to have a little more travel. We wanted to change the feel. We experimented with that a little bit at Grattan and then again at Barber, and he preferred the way that it felt after we went in and did that. I safety wired the pivot bolt for the brake lever here and also the adjuster for the brake toe piece. Brake caliper mount bolts are safety wired. For the brake caliper bracket, I also kind of machined out a portion of the bracket and used a shoulder bolt back there, and I got this thing captured. So when you pull the rear wheel off of it, the caliper itself stays there. It just makes the tire change in the back a whole heck of a lot easier. We already talked about that spring, a little safety wire here. We have safety wired the coolant drain right here. That was a requirement for MotoAmerica. Front caliper bolts are safety wired. We're using the Woodcraft fork sliders. You can see those have been on the ground a couple of times and held up really well. That's a pretty solid overview of what we've done to this bike. There's not a lot you can do to compete at MotoAmerica. They're trying to keep this playing field relatively level, so it more comes down to the rider. Like I said, we're going to do another video and break down how the weekend went. What I can tell you is every one of these kids out there is fast, right? And to get a podium at that level is going to require a tremendous amount of effort, not only from Max, but from the rest of us. I have a lot to learn. I have never been a crew chief before, right? I'm fortunate that I have a lot of great people helping me out. Lenny Alden from K-Tech was unbelievably helpful with the suspension setup. We really got the bike into a great place. Rocco Lander's dad, Stoney Landers, helped me a little bit. Jeremy Toy, Jesse Norton from Ninja 400. Chris Ulrich, of course, from Team Hammer is a good friend of mine. It's excellent to have resources like that to call upon when you're trying to get something like this done. We're excited for the future. We don't know exactly where it's going to go other than that we're going to Indy, maybe going to Laguna this year. And then in 2021, we're looking forward to doing a full season of MotoAmerica to see where Max Van's skills stack up against the rest of the riders in the country.